Welcome to VSO W, where we dive deep into those topics that really matter.
Yeah.
Today, we're tackling the idea of free speech,
Okay.
especially how it's being challenged in this digital age we live in.
Mm-hmm.
You've given us some fascinating notes and articles,
Yeah.
everything from those landmark Supreme Court cases to global perspectives. So
Yeah.
let's get ready for some of those aha moments as we unravel this fundamental right together.
What's really interesting about free speech
Yeah.
is that it's not a fixed idea.
Right.
It's constantly changing, being shaped and reshaped
Yeah.
by how we interpret the law, social movements, and of course the whole digital revolution. It's
Right.
like this living thing that adapts to its environment.
It really is.
Yeah.
Speaking of its birth, let's go back to the roots of free speech in the U.S.
Okay.
That core belief that open expression is vital for a thriving democracy.
Mm-hmm. You have to think back to the creation of the First Amendment. James Madison, the architect of it all, was really influenced by how the British suppressed dissent back then.
Right.
He wanted to make sure that the new nation
Yeah.
didn't repeat those mistakes.
Right.
It's almost like he embedded this DNA of rebellion into the U.S.
Right.
right from the start.
But then just a few years later, boom,
Yeah.
the Sedition Act of 1798
Mhm.
makes it a crime to criticize the government.
Right.
So it's like the country was having second thoughts
Yeah.
about this whole free speech thing.
Yeah. The Sedition Act
Totally.
shows this tension
Mhm.
that has always been there, this back and forth
Right.
between valuing open expression
Yeah.
and figuring out how absolute that freedom should be.
Right.
It's a question we're still dealing with,
Yeah.
especially with how technology is changing things.
Exactly. And fast forward to the early 20th century,
Okay.
World War I,
Yeah.
certain types of speech become incredibly sensitive. And this is where we see the landmark case of Schenck v. United States.
Schenck was a turning point because it introduced the clear and present danger test,
Right.
which basically meant that if your speech was a clear and immediate threat, like
Right.
yelling fire in a crowded theater,
Right.
it could be restricted.
Okay.
This set a precedent
Yeah.
for limiting free speech based on the situation and potential harm,
Okay.
a concept that's still relevant today.
That's so true.
Yeah.
And this is where the legal interpretation gets really interesting.
Okay.
It shifts from protecting any kind of speech
Mm-hmm.
to recognizing that sometimes expression needs to be limited for safety and order.
It's like realizing that freedom without responsibility can be chaotic.
Right.
Finding that balance is key.
Yeah.
You see this in later Supreme Court cases, too,
Mhm.
refining the concept of free speech and its boundaries.
So, for instance, cases like Stromberg v. California and Tinker v. Des Moines
Right.
expanded the definition of speech beyond just words.
In Strom,
Yeah.
displaying a red flag as a protest was considered protected symbolic speech.
Oh.
And in Tinker, students wearing armbands to oppose the Vietnam War was
Yeah.
seen as protected student expression.
Right.
These cases showed
Yeah.
that actions and symbols could be powerful messages, too,
Right.
deserving protection under the First Amendment.
It's fascinating how the court acknowledged that free speech can have many forms,
Yeah.
and suppressing those forms, even if they're not words,
Yeah.
could violate this fundamental right.
It highlights a recurring theme in free speech law, this push and pull
Yeah.
between protecting individual expression, even if
Right.
it's unconventional, and keeping some order in society.
Right.
It's like trying to hold water in your hand.
Okay.
You need the right balance of openness and structure
Right.
to keep it from slipping away.
And then things get really interesting in the 1960s and 70s. It's like a free speech renaissance,
Okay.
with courts pushing limits
Yeah.
and protecting even offensive speech.
This era was all about protecting unpopular speech, especially speech that challenged norms or went against the government.
Right.
Cases like Cohen v. California, where a guy wore a jacket with a profane message against the draft,
Right.
showed that even offensive language could be protected,
Right.
as long as it didn't incite violence or a real threat.
That case is a great example of the court dealing with the complexities of free speech during a time of social and political change,
Yeah.
trying to protect dissent
Right.
and challenging ideas without going too far.
It's like this. If we only protect speech that everyone agrees with,
Right.
then we're not really protecting free speech at all. The real test is protecting the voices that make us uncomfortable,
Right.
the ones that challenge us.
This makes me think about what's happening now
Okay.
with social media companies and their content moderation policies.
Right.
They're trying to walk that line
Yeah.
between removing harmful content
Mm-hmm.
and not being accused of censorship.
It's a tough balance to find.
Right. And it's like what the courts were dealing with decades ago.
Exactly.
Before we go into the digital age,
Yeah.
I think it's important to note
Mm-hmm.
that all these legal precedents we've talked about
Right.
mostly address government restrictions on speech.
Mm-hmm.
What about the challenges coming from private companies,
Right.
especially with the internet and social media?
That's where things get really complex.
Okay.
It's a whole new frontier with its own rules
Right.
and challenges.
On one hand, the internet has created so many opportunities
Yeah.
for people to express themselves and connect.
Mm.
It's like a giant global town square
Mhm.
where anyone with an internet connection
Right.
can share their thoughts and ideas.
Exactly.
But this explosion of expression online
yeah.
has also opened the door to censorship and surveillance,
Right.
both by governments and private companies.
It's like a double-edged sword.
Yeah,
More freedom to speak,
right.
but also more ways to be silenced or watched.
And that's where organizations like the ACLU and EFF come in,
Yeah.
advocating for online free speech protections and pushing back against restrictions,
They played a crucial role
right?
in holding both governments and corporations accountable,
Yeah.
reminding us that the fight for free speech never ends.
Right.
It's happening in courtrooms,
Yeah.
in the streets, and online.
They're like digital guardians of free speech.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
challenging those censorship laws,
Yeah.
pushing back against surveillance,
Right.
and advocating for stronger online protections.
The conversation about free speech isn't just history.
Right.
It's happening now,
Right. Right now.
all around us.
And it's happening globally.
Mm-hmm.
Free speech doesn't look the same everywhere.
It really doesn't.
Different countries have different approaches
Mm-hmm.
to this right, shaped by their history,
Yeah.
culture, and politics.
Right.
What might be protected speech in one place
Mm-hmm.
could land you in jail in another.
It's true.
Okay, so let's zoom out. Look at free speech on the world stage.
Mm.
We know the U.S. prides itself on its free speech protection.
Yeah.
But how does that compare to other countries?
It's interesting to see how different cultures have approached this.
Mm.
The U.S. is definitely a leader in free speech protection, especially when it comes to offensive or unpopular speech.
Okay.
You see a much more cautious approach in Europe,
Yeah.
where there are stricter laws against hate speech and defamation.
So in Europe, they emphasize protecting people from harm caused by speech,
Right.
even if it means limiting what can be said.
Mm-hmm.
What about other regions?
It varies a lot.
Oh.
Canada, for example, they're
Yeah.
committed to free speech like the U.S.,
Mhm.
but they also have laws against hate speech and defamation.
Right.
It's more nuanced,
Hmm.
trying to balance free expression with protecting vulnerable groups.
And then you have countries like China,
Right.
where free speech is severely restricted.
Yeah.
The government controls the media and censors online content.
It makes you think about the freedoms we often take for granted.
Right.
China represents a very different model,
Mm-hmm.
where the state prioritizes control over individual expression.
Okay.
It's a stark contrast
Yeah.
to the approach we see in many Western democracies.
It shows how the balance between individual rights and state control
Mm-hmm.
can be completely different around the world.
Absolutely.
It's clear there's no one-size-fits-all approach to free speech.
Right.
It's a complex mix of legal frameworks,
Mm-hmm.
cultural norms,
Mhm.
and political realities.
It's a global tapestry
Yeah.
woven with different threads.
Right.
It's fascinating how different these approaches are, but even with those differences, there are some common themes.
Okay.
The struggle to balance individual rights with what's good for society.
Right.
The impact of technology on how we communicate and express ourselves.
Yeah.
These are challenges everywhere.
That's
It seems like every society,
Yeah.
no matter its structure or value, has to grapple with these questions about free speech.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's a global issue.
Mm-hmm.
And as our world becomes more interconnected,
Right.
it's even more important to understand these different perspectives
Exactly.
and talk about how to protect this right in the digital age.
Uh-huh.
The internet has blurred so many lines
Yeah.
and created new challenges
It really has.
that we're still trying to figure out.
And that brings us to another important point.
Okay.
The evolving nature of free speech.
Right.
What we've talked about so far, it's
Yeah.
just a snapshot,
Okay.
a glimpse into this ever-changing landscape as technology keeps advancing
Right.
and societies face new challenges.
Yeah.
The interpretation of free speech will definitely keep changing.
It makes sense.
It's not static.
Right.
It's a living, Right. Constantly being shaped by new situations and new problems.
The rise of AI and its impact on content moderation.
Oh, absolutely.
Algorithms are being used to remove content that violates platforms' rules.
Yeah.
But this raises concerns about bias,
Right.
transparency, and overreach.
It really does.
It makes you wonder who's really in control
Yeah.
of the information we see and the voices we hear.
That's a question that experts are grappling with right now.
Right. Legal experts, ethicists, technologists.
Yeah, it's all of them.
And it's just one example of the many challenges ahead
Right.
as we navigate the future of free speech in a rapidly changing world.
We need to be vigilant,
Yeah.
engage in thoughtful debate, and constantly reassess how we balance individual rights with protecting our communities from harm.
It's a delicate balancing act.
It really is.
And it's not just about those big headline-grabbing cases.
Right.
It's about understanding the nuances, the smaller battles that are happening all the time.
Like with protests.
Yeah.
The right to assemble and protest is fundamental to free speech,
Right.
but it often faces resistance.
Yeah.
Even in countries that value free speech.
We've seen this throughout history.
Yeah, from the civil rights movement to the recent Black Lives Matter protests.
It shows that even in societies that value free speech,
Right.
there's a struggle to balance dissent with order and control.
It's like this constant tension
Yeah.
between allowing people to voice their grievances
Right.
and preventing chaos.
And this tension is even stronger with social media,
Absolutely.
where protests can spread so quickly.
Yeah, and that tension plays out online too.
Right.
We've seen governments crack down on online activism, using surveillance to silence dissent.
It's like a digital arms race.
It really is.
Governments and activists trying to outmaneuver each other.
The fight for free speech isn't just in physical spaces.
Yeah.
It's happening online too.
And the stakes are high.
They really are.
That's why the work of the ACLU and the EFF is so important.
Yeah.
They're fighting to protect our digital rights.
And make sure the internet is a place for open expression.
They're constantly challenging censorship laws,
Yeah.
pushing back against surveillance,
Right.
and advocating for stronger online protections.
They're like digital guardians of free speech,
Exactly.
reminding us that the battle for free expression is constant,
It is.
and we need to be part of it.
We can't take it for granted.
It's not something we can just assume will always be there.
It's a battle that we all have a stake in, whether we realize it or not.
Right.
Our lives are deeply connected to free speech.
And so many women.
It affects everything,
Yeah.
from access to information, to political debate,
Right.
to our creativity and self-expression.
It's woven into our societies,
It really is.
shaping how we interact,
Yeah.
how we see the world, and who we are as individuals.
It's not just an abstract legal concept. It's
Right.
something that touches every part of our lives.
From our personal relationships
Yeah.
to our political beliefs.
That-
And that's why it's important to step back sometimes, look beyond the headlines,
Right.
and really think about what free speech means to us.
What it means personally and collectively.
Yeah.
To understand its history, its complexities, its limitations, and its power.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that this right isn't just given to us.
Right.
It's something people have fought for
Uh-huh.
and defended for centuries,
Yeah.
and we need to keep protecting it.
The power to challenge the status quo,
Yeah.
to hold those in power accountable, to spark debate, to inspire change,
Right.
to make our voices heard.
And that power can be used for good or bad.
It can.
That's why it's so important to use it wisely.
Absolutely.
And speaking of power,
Yeah.
important to remember that free speech isn't always used for good.
That's true.
It can be used to spread hate, incite violence, and silence others.
It's a reminder that free speech,
Right.
like any powerful tool,
Right. Yeah.
can be misused.
And abused.
Exactly.
And that's where the conversation about free speech gets even more complex.
It does.
How do we protect free expression
Yeah.
while also fighting hate and discrimination?
I just got
It's a
this new
question
ring in the
societies
mail,
around
and
the
I
world are
love it.
struggling with.
There's no
It's
easy
made from a
answer.
There
premium
really
metal
isn't.
called
It's a
tungsten,
constant
and with the
struggle
charcoal hammer
to find
design,
that
you can
balance.
style it
Especially
with
new
anything.
technologies
Right.
and how
It's
we
a comfort cut
communicate.
We need
ring
to be
plated with
mindful of
rose
potential
gold, which
harm,
gives off a luxurious
while also
feel.
protecting the right to express ourselves.
Plus, the
There are no
smooth gold
easy
interior
answers,
prevents
but
any
there are
damage or
important
coloring to your
conversations
finger.
to be had.
What kind of conversations?
So if you're
Conversations
looking
about
for a
the limits
stylish
of
ring, tap the
tolerance,
link
Okay.
below
the
and get
role
one
of
today.
technology in spreading hate speech,
Mhm.
and the responsibilities of individuals and platforms
Right.
in making the online world more inclusive and equitable.
It's not enough to just defend free speech in theory.
Exactly.
We need to think about how it's used. who benefits from it
Yeah.
and
What-
who's being silent. It's about looking beyond the surface
Right.
and seeing the real-world consequences of our words and actions.
It's about moving beyond a simple view of free speech
Right.
as an absolute right
Uh-huh.
and recognizing that it exists within a complex system.
Of social,
Yeah.
political,
Uh-huh.
and technological forces.
It's about understanding the nuances,
Mm.
the gray areas, the
Mm.
trade-offs, the potential consequences of both protecting and limiting free speech.
It's complex.
It really is.
And there's no easy answer.
It's about recognizing that free speech comes with responsibilities.
Right.
Responsibilities to use our voices thoughtfully,
Yeah.
to have respectful dialogue, and to stand up against hate and injustice.
Because ultimately,
Yeah,
the true value of free speech
right.
isn't about protecting the powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It's about amplifying the voices of the marginalized,
Exactly.
the silenced,
Yeah.
and the oppressed.
It's about using our voices to challenge injustice,
Right.
to demand accountability. Mm-hmm.
To create a more just world for everyone.
That's where the power of free speech really shines.
It really
It's
does.
a powerful tool for change,
Absolutely.
a crucial part of any real democracy.
So as we navigate this changing world of free speech,
Mm.
it's crucial to remember these complexities,
Right.
to approach these issues with nuance and critical thinking,
Yeah.
and to remember that the fight for free speech
Uh-huh.
isn't just about protecting words.
It's about protecting the very foundations of a free and open society.
It's about empowering people to speak truth to power, to challenge the way things are,
Yeah.
and to shape their own lives.
Right.
It's about giving a voice to those who don't have one,
Mm-hmm.
and making sure everyone can participate in the conversation.
It's about creating a world where everyone's voice can be heard,
Yeah.
no matter their background, their beliefs, or who they are.
That's a world worth fighting for.
And it's a fight that needs all of us to be involved, informed, and willing to stand up for what we believe in. We can't leave it to just politicians or activists.
Mhm.
It's something we all need to be a part of.
Because the right to speak freely isn't just a privilege.
It's more than that.
It's a responsibility
Exact.
to use our voices wisely,
Yeah.
to listen to others with empathy,
Mm-hmm.
and to create a world where everyone feels safe
Right.
and empowered to express themselves.
And that brings us back to the core of this deep dive.
It does.
We've explored the world of free speech. We've touched on its history,
Yeah.
its legal frameworks,
Mm-hmm.
its global variations,
Right.
and its challenges in the digital age.
But this is just the beginning.
It is.
The conversation about free speech is ongoing,
Yeah.
and we all need to be a part of it.
We need to ask tough questions, challenge our own assumptions, and talk to people who have different views. Because the future of free speech and the future of our societies
Right.
depends on our willingness to engage with these complexities,
Okay.
to embrace nuance, and to work towards a world
Yeah.
where everyone's voice can be heard.
It's easy to just stay in our own little worlds.
Yeah.
But free speech is a global issue. It affects us all.
Mm-hmm.
So what can we do? How can we be more thoughtful and engaged?
Right.
You know, when it comes to free speech, both in our communities and globally,
Yeah.
it feels like there's so much going on.
There is.
It's hard to know where to even begin.
Well, I think the first thing is we need to educate ourselves.
Right.
Understand the history,
Mm-hmm.
the legal stuff,
Yeah.
the different viewpoints
Okay.
on this really complex issue.
It's like-
Don't just accept those little sound bites or
Uh-huh.
what you hear from one side.
Yeah.
Dig deeper.
Okay.
Challenge your own assumptions
Yeah.
and be open to viewpoints that make you uncomfortable.
I like that.
You know, there's so much information out there.
Right.
But we need to be smart about what we consume.
It's about being intellectually curious,
Exactly.
not avoiding tough conversations,
Yeah.
but seeing them as opportunities to learn and grow.
It's easy to just hang out with people who agree with us,
It is.
but that doesn't really make us think.
And it's also about how we use our own voices.
Oh, absolutely.
The internet has given us all this platform,
Right.
but with that comes responsibility.
Yeah.
Think before you post.
Mm-hmm.
Consider the impact of your words
Right.
and be willing to talk respectfully,
Yeah.
even when you disagree.
The way we communicate online can have real consequences.
Mm-hmm.
We can't forget that.
It's recognizing that free speech doesn't mean you can just say anything
Right.
without thinking about the
It's
consequences.
sort of free pass.
Our words have power,
They do.
and we have to use that power responsibly.
And if you see something online
Yeah.
that you think is harmful or hateful,
Mm-hmm.
don't just scroll past it.
Okay.
speak up,
Right.
report it,
Yeah.
engage in counter-speech. We
Mhm.
all have a part to play
Right.
in making the online world a better place.
So we can't just passively consume content.
Exactly.
We have to actively shape the online world.
It's about being active participants,
Right.
not passive bystanders.
The fight for free speech is ongoing,
It is.
and it needs all of us to be engaged and informed.
And don't be afraid to get involved in advocacy.
Okay.
Support organizations like the ACLU and the EFF. They're fighting to protect our digital rights.
Right.
Contact your elected officials.
Yeah.
Tell them that free speech matters to you. Every voice counts.
Those organizations are doing great work,
They are.
but they need our help to keep fighting.
Because in the end,
Yeah.
the future of free speech depends on all of us.
Right.
It's a shared responsibility,
Yeah.
a commitment to upholding this fundamental right, not just for us.
But for future generations.
We can't just leave it for someone else to handle.
We all have a part to play.
So keep asking those tough questions.
Yeah.
Keep challenging the way things are. Keep those conversations going.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. It takes endurance,
Yeah.
vigilance, and a real belief in the power of open expression.
It's a fight worth having.
It really is.
And that's the end of our deep dive
Yeah.
into the world of free speech.
We hope you learned something.
We hope this gave you a better understanding of this complex and constantly changing, right?
Remember, the conversation doesn't end here.
Right.
Keep exploring, keep learning, keep using your voice.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment.
Yeah. Let us know what you thought
What resonated with you?
and what questions you still have.
We love hearing from you.
We do.
And until next time,
Keep those deep dives going.
thank you for listening to VSOW.